So first of all, water values. What have we heard so far? Well, of course, water is essential for all life and highly valued, and we understand it's highly valued by the people of Saskatchewan. And that community input is key for this study. Some of the questions and concerns from the public so far that we've heard in general include questions around the potential risk to irrigation or cattle use from increase in algae or decrease in water availability, potential impacts to recreation from an increase in algae, changes to ice cover or wintering for ice fishing because of potential thermal changes in the project, risks to human health leading to risk of contamination to drinking water, risk to environmental to the environment leading to a risk contamination um, to lakes and downstream habitat, wildlife, and risk to ecosystem health from thermal changes in water temperature. So the overall sort of the main types of questions, concerns that we've heard to date. And of course, we'll be, as part of conducting this water evaluation study, we'll be continuing to get that information through the engagement program that's concurrently going on for for the project to make sure that we have that information to consider in our study. So some of the sort of the basics around water valuation. Water valuation studies themselves are used to inform businesses, governments, and the public on water values to help understand potential impacts and dependencies across different values. The information the studies provide is used to inform decisions about projects or programs. So it helps answer question, what are the impacts of a project? What are the trade-offs involved? What are the unintended consequences? So one feature of a water valuation study is we're taking a very sort of holistic approach across all types of values, and we'll talk a bit more about that later in the presentation. How can we make the project better? So by understanding impacts on water values, we can look for ways to potentially adjust the design of the project or apply additional mitigation so that we essentially make the project better by reducing impacts on water values and potentially increasing benefits of the project. So it is recognized. It does mean that we recognize all benefits of the provided by water and understand what could be lost if there is an impact on water. So the goal is to document all the water values that may be impacted by a project or program. So first of all, you study all key values. And again, this is a wide range of value types. They may be directly part of the economy, like use of water by irrigation for irrigation agriculture, could be use by reliance on water, like lakes for recreation and tourism, uh, etc. It could be or uses by ecosystems themselves and providing ecosystems functions that indirectly support human uses and social values. And we'll talk a bit more about that a little later as well. Or other social cultural values that people hold for water. Once we study and understand the full range of sort of key values, ultimately, it's in ideal situation, try to be able to understand what those values are using a common metric. We focus on dollar values in water valuation, and we'll be doing that wherever feasible, wherever the data allows, and wherever we can reasonably provide an estimate. We understand that that's not always possible. We try to do that because it puts everything on a level playing field. You're essentially comparing dollar for dollar. You can add things up and you can sort of compare impacts across different scenarios. But we also want to make sure we document the social context in addition to the monetary value. So that's important. So that um, qualitative information, that contextual information, that narrative, the understanding that people have for how they value water is important to consider, whether or not we can put a dollar value on it. So that's still an important part of what we're doing. And once we understand that, we model the changes in the key values associated with a project to understand the impacts across different value types. So that's the overall approach. Broadly speaking, water valuation studies are used across a number of different areas, number of different sectors for different purposes, from municipal water management to business investment decisions to agriculture irrigation practices. Some examples of where it's used is to help make water allocation more efficient, to identify opportunities to preserve water. If you understand again the various value types um, and the values placed on those different types of values, so to speak, and determining the best location of business development with minimal impact to water. Overall, we want to make sure we try to understand those externalities, and by that, that means those water values and impacts on water values that aren't normally part of a business decision, aren't normally captured in the economy. Doesn't mean they're not important. It means actually the opposite, that they're likely important to consider, and that's what we try to do, trying to bring in all those other types of values that aren't normally part of a decision. Informing government policies and programs for environmental management is also where water valuation studies are used. And lastly, supporting corporate ESG or environment social governance reporting. I just wanted to note the approach we're taking to water valuation for this is consistent with contemporary ESG reporting practices. So how are we going to do it for this project? While the water valuation study is one of the studies SaskPower is completing to inform the identification of water values in potential siting areas and to look at potential impacts of a project in those potential siting areas. We will seek to understand and describe the types of values that people place on water in those study areas, and it will also show how these values might be impacted by the SMR development project. So you may have seen this in previous presentations. There's two main study areas that we're looking at. In Estevan, there is the water valuation study itself is going to focus on what's been defined as a potential siting area. So that is shown by the orange line. So it includes the Rafferty and Boundary Dam Reservoir as well as Grant Devine. And for the elbow area, again, you can see by the orange line, the boundary there, the potential siting area around elbow and portions of Lake Diefenbaker. So again, that is where we're gonna focus our study to understand the water values within those study area boundaries. Some of the data sources we're going to use. First of all, it's important to use, and we understand the importance of the information from the engagement. So we'll be including information from in-person virtual events such as this. So the comments people leave and information people provide during these sessions will be considered. Online engagement, and hopefully you've all had a chance to navigate through the online engagement portal and some of the information there and the ways in which you can share your thoughts and views. On that same portal, there's also a mapping exercise. So it's a place where you can actually put a pin in a map and describe, identify locations that are particularly important or that you wanted or to make known or to talk about or to share information on. We're also undertaking a water valuation survey. We're planning on launching that later next week. You'll also see that through the engagement portal. I encourage you all to revisit that site later next week. And we'll be having a water valuation survey that people can fill out, and that'll be running until the end of January. There's the duty consult process that is concurrently undertaking, SaskPower is undertaking with the Indigenous groups. There's regional evaluation processes. So again, those are committees with invited representative from Indigenous groups, stakeholders in the public and local organizations from the two study areas. And there's other technical, physical, biological data that is being collected as part of other studies. So we're pulling together the information relative to water and water values that is specific to these potential siting areas that we've identified. I want to spend a few minutes on this slide to provide you sort of a little bit more detail on how we're approaching this. There's different types of water values as I've described earlier. There's different ways to categorize these and put these in a framework. This is one way of doing that. So the figure on the left of the slide there. So there's direct uses of water by people. Again, those are things like irrigation, agriculture, watering livestock, used by industries such as mining industry, water use by businesses, by communities, could be recreation, social, cultural uses of water. So people actually using water. So there's certainly values attached with that. There's use of water by the environment that also benefit people. And this sort of broadly can be referred to as ecosystem functions, things like regulating water flows, nutrient cycling, and overall support for biodiversity are some examples of that. This is what we can call option values, or the option to use water in the future. So I may not be um, wanting to go down swimming in the lake this year, for example, or otherwise use the water soon, but I have value for it in that I know that it'll be there in the future if I should choose to want to do that or want to use the water in the future. So there's a premium that you put on that because of keeping the option to use in the future. There's also various non-use values. So those are, general sort of the called the existence values. There's altruistic values, bequest values. Knowing and having value for knowing that something is preserved or something exists in a certain natural condition, and then something is preserved for future generations. And there's also social, cultural, heritage values attached to water, even though you might not actually use it directly. All these types of information and certainly as you move from the top to the bottom of this figure, it becomes harder to put a dollar value on. You have to use some more sophisticated techniques. So economists over the years have come up with some pretty sophisticated techniques to try to measure these. We'll be applying a spatial economic model. It integrates a large number of studies that have done over the years, not just in Canada, but elsewhere and around the world, tries to uh, sort of take the information that you have for a specific site or specific location, you basically calibrate that model. Within the model, there's literally thousands of mathematical relationships and functions that calculate and take into account various values and provide an estimate. We'll be looking again at the current values and then looking at changes with the project, and we'll be also taking into account climate change because, of course, that will have impacts on water itself. And again, the study you'll be doing will be supplemented with other information on values provided by Indigenous groups, stakeholders, and the public. And that contextual information will remain important for us.